Well, welcome to our next Intersections interview, and I'm here with Michael. Hi, Michael.
Hi.
Michael's a friend I know from the Husbands Out to Their Wives group that I've talked about before, and I interviewed Peter from there before. And so, Michael, I guess we'll just jump right into this, okay?
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it.
Okay. Now, you identify as gay. What's
Yes.
that mean to you?
Well, that means that I'm primarily attracted to men,
Mhm.
and really have always been primarily attracted to men. On the Kinsey scale, I'd put myself at like maybe a 5.5, so like is almost to the end. Um, uh, but I'm romantically and sexually attracted to men and not women, really.
Okay. And now you identify as male also. What's it mean for you being male?
Um, that's a tough question because I don't really know what that means. uh, I'm happy with the body I was born with, and there's, I suppose we could get a much little thing about what it means to be male, but I'm happy with the body that I have. I'm happy with how I fit into the world.
Um, so you're separated from your wife. You have no current boyfriends, but you're casually dating.
Yep.
And you also said that you only have sex with someone that you're either dating or friends with before having sex. So how's that approach work for you?
Well, I think when I was younger, I would, before I got married, I had a boyfriend, and that was the early '90s, and there were a lot of people around me that were, doing the hookups in the bathroom and whatever, and that just never really made sense to me, and it never really worked. It's like I would be too nervous, and that just stuff wouldn't work.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that I need to have some sort of a connection with the person. I do have someone that I'm seeing right now, for example, and we're just buddies. I mean, we're there to explore sexuality, and that's it. That's the tenet of our relationship. For me right now, because of the fact that I've got some complications with, separation and trying to figure out what the relationship is with my wife, and, my kids are teenagers, I've got a lot of stuff going on in my life, and the idea of having a capital R relationship is just a little bit too much. So, and really, my goal right now is just to have a lot of friends. I mean, when I was married and closeted, I didn't have any friends at all. So that's really been my focus right now, is just good friendships. And if that has to have a sexual component, then that's good. And if it doesn't, then that's fine too.
Okay, that makes sense. Now you said your ideal romantic relationship is polyamorous, with the sexual part of that being like a swinger type setup. So can you kind of just describe what your ideal relationship or set of relationships would look like?
I think anytime you put in labels, it makes it a little bit difficult, because I think all of us have different ideals in our head, and sometimes titles don't quite work, because the word swinger just really bugs me. But I think, first of all, I think that we have the capacity to love more than one person. I do love my wife. I'm not sexually attracted to her, but I do care for her. I mean, I've lived with her for 20 years, so there is a caring there. And in DC last year, I had a boyfriend that I loved. Now, the incompatibility between those two was that both of them wanted to be primary, whatever that means. And I couldn't really put that into that context. I had a friend in Gamma in DC who, I talked to him about that once, and he said, how do you pick your favorite kid? How do you pick your favorite food? There's not really a way to do that. You can love more than one thing. And I think that I would put that into my ideal relationship too. I think that I would want to be open to having as many relationships as fit, as long as everybody were fitting each other. I mean, I wouldn't want to make anybody uncomfortable or whatever. So there would have to be a lot of communication. Um, but again, I don't see how you can love one person more than another, and I can see where you can love people in a different way, and equally.
Mhm.
Does that answer your question? I don't know if I'm skirting it or not.
Yeah, I think it
Okay.
does. Um, Now, obviously, um, didn't start as a kid knowing that this would be your full identity and who you are. So, can you just kind of tell me your journey to understanding yourself and your identities and how you are today?
So my journey is kind of. I look back on it sometimes and I think, well, gosh, I should have been smarter than this. But um, so I was about 13 or 14 when my father came out,
Hmm.
and it was somewhat traumatic because he came out and well, he and my mom had divorced about a year and a half earlier, and then he came out, and then all of a sudden he had a boyfriend, and then all of a sudden he moved to Texas, um, and my mom was very, very angry, and I knew by then that every fantasy I ever had was about males. Sometimes I would have a fantasy in my head where it was a female with male genitalia, or something like that. But it was always, I knew I was gay. Or I don't know that I necessarily gave it that specific title, but I knew what I was. I knew that I wasn't normal, straight.
Mhm.
And so that's when I started my kind of path of denial, because I found myself a girlfriend because that's what my friends did. I found myself, at the same time I was being drawn to, campy culture and, uh, uh, musical theater and all that stuff. So I was kind of being stereotypical gay in one hand and trying really hard to mask that on the other. Um, when I went to college, I started to explore my sexuality a little bit, but yet I still thought of myself as, no, I'm going to be a straight boy. I'm going to be straight. I really like this, but I'm really going to be straight. I'm going to, I'm gonna do the right thing. Um, and then I had a boyfriend for a while, and I decided to break up with him for a couple of different reasons. Um, well, I decided to leave my gay lifestyle that I was in at that moment for a couple of different reasons. One was that all of our friends were just going to clubs all the time. That was their whole social outlet, was going to clubs and that whole party period. And a lot of bathroom sex and that kind of thing. I mean, that's what all my friends were doing. I didn't want to be a part of that. And in one summer, there was a boy who was beat up on my college campus, and another one who was more beaten up on the strip out, the gay neighborhood in my town. And so those two things coincided, and both of them were pretty brutal. And I thought, I can't deal with that. I can't deal with being universally hated and having my whole sexual life be in bathrooms. I can't do that. I just don't want to do that. So I broke up with a boyfriend, and I had already met my wife at that point. She and I had actually dated for a very short time before that occurrence, and then we broke up. And then we were trying to be friends, and anyway, long story short, we were pregnant. So then once we were pregnant, I said, I need to do the right thing, being a good Southern boy. So we got married. I mean, she was 8.5 months pregnant at the time, but we got married. And then I just sort of buried everything. I didn't talk to her about it. I mean, she knew, but we didn't talk about my sexuality. We didn't talk about what my needs were or anything. We just buried it. And pretended that everything was just going to be okay, that she was going to be magic and it was going to be all fixed. And I think for a long time she just thought she had fixed it. So I didn't ever talk about it, and I guess every year or so she would discover porn on the computer or whatever, and we'd have a big discussion, and I would apologized profusely and said never do it again, and then just kind of went deeper into a shell. And that went on until about 2010. There was a bunch of other things that happened all at once that just changes in the way that we were relating to each other because our kids were teenagers instead of young. And I folded. I just had a nervous breakdown is really what it boils down to. And I came out again and I said, you know what, this is the deal. Our relationship as we knew it is over. I can't do that anymore. This is who I am. We need to change. And I guess I lived at home for about 2 years after, well, a year and a half after coming out. Then I moved with work to Washington, D.C. and lived out. And that was 2 years. And then when I came back here, I just said, I don't want to live with you. I can live down the street, and I want to be a good friend, but I don't want to live with you. And so now I live down the street.
Okay. It's quite a journey.
It has been an interesting one.
Now, with your wife, you're not divorced still. You're separated.
Right.
But you did say in your questionnaire that had you been straight, you think you would have divorced years ago. So can you kind of touch on that?
Yeah. So Amy and I are from very different backgrounds. My mother was one of those that she wanted so desperately to be a Rockefeller or something. So she was very, I had to go to cotillion and I had to do all of the fancy society stuff as far as Oklahoma can make that be a society thing. So, I was being groomed to be in that, in the upper class, I guess. And Amy was, she was from a poor family, and, they just sort of did what they did. And I think that's part of it. I think that also there's just, we have some personality quirks that aren't that great. I think we're good friends, but we really weren't good couple material. And I think had I been straight, had I not been using her as my beard, in essence, even though I wasn't acting on my sexuality really, I think that I would have not been able to put up with a lot of the things that I put up with. I think that I would have been a lot more apt to say, no, I'm not playing this game with you, and we're done.
Right.
So.
That's interesting.
It's hard to really know what you would do in that situation, because going back, I don't know what would be different. A lot of aspects of a relationship would probably be different. But just in knowing Amy, I don't think that, again, good friend, I want to maintain a good friendship with her, but I don't think that I would have been in love with her to the extent that I would have been married.
It makes sense. And they say hindsight's 20/20, so it's easy
exactly.
to do that. Yeah. Now, I just kind of wanted to kind of end on this with, as far as how your sexuality, your relationship orientation, how they've affected you in different areas of your life. So I'm just going to kind of touch on different aspects of living and just how those have been affected by it. So first of all, socially, has there been?
Yeah, I would say that when, I was so afraid of people. This was not a conscious thought, mind you. Mm-hmm. But I think that in retrospect, I think that I was so afraid of people seeing through my veneer. I thought that I was so obvious that I didn't want to get close to anybody. So, I'd have work friends, but those work friends ended at 5. When I left work, that didn't carry over. So they were the people I had lunch with. But outside of that, and if I left that job, then I never spoke to them again. And again, it was because I just was so afraid of people seeing through me and calling me out. And when our kids were young, we didn't do anything, or we didn't have any friends. We didn't go out. We didn't We had PTA things that we did, and so I was very insulated. And at one point in my life, I was very um, shy, is the best way to put it. I just was, very quiet and very shy, and I didn't really communicate with people a lot. Even at work, I mean, it's like I would eat lunch with people, but they would make the initial connection. They would talk, and I would respond. Um, so I think that, and I don't think that that's really my natural personality. I think that in the last 5 years, I've sort of proven to myself that I really am not that shy. I'm not really that introverted. I'm really a lot more apt to start conversations
Mm-hmm.
with people and create friendships. Um, so that's been almost a 180 as far as how that part of my personality has been. So I think that while I was hiding my sexuality, I think that I was very protective.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that that's certainly one way that it affected me individually and affected my family too. I mean, we were, like I said, very separated, and so today, even still, my kids are apt to have a very small group of friends, and they don't, they're not really outgoing as a family. We're just sort of homebodies.
Mm. So you think some of that's actually being passed on to your kids?
I think that it's just a model of what they've seen.
Yeah.
They're used to Amy and I being kind of quiet homebodies, and that's all that they know. I think that my son is now 21 and in college and living living in an apartment, and so he's now beginning to discover what his personality is outside of who we were. So, and the same will be for my other children as they start their adult lives. They're going to define what they're comfortable with. But I think that around us, and I think that there's also a tendency to sort of protect their mom in a way. She's a little bit of a binge drinker. That was one of the challenges that we've had over the years, and so they're very protective of her. Not like other Al-Anon kids. I mean, they are just like any other kid that grows up with a parent with a problem. I think that they're a little bit more protective of her than they are of me, certainly.
Okay. How about legally? Any effect?
As far as things that I avoided thinking that they were illegal or something, or what? I guess
Just
define
in
your
general,
question.
like, have there been any, because of your sexuality or relationship orientations, have there been like any legal challenges or just legal issues that you faced?
Not really, no, because again, while I was married, I was monogamous with my wife the whole time that we were married until I came out in 2010. I never. So I never had situations where I got caught in the bushes or whatever. Um, so outside of the marriage thing, there's not really. I can't think of anything that is a legal aspect. I mean, I know that there was a time where I was worried about that kind of. I mean, before I got married in the first place, there was a period where I worried about that because that was before the Supreme Court said that the states couldn't have sodomy laws, and so that was kind of one of those things where you'd go to, if you were with somebody that you didn't know very well, you had to say, or I always did the whole "Are you a cop?" because I was always afraid that I'd get thrown in jail for sodomy. But yeah, no serious legal things.
Okay. Okay. How about medically?
Nothing that's really been manifested. Well, one thing I'll say is that I after coming out and beginning to care for myself, I lost a lot of weight, so that was certainly a good thing medically.
It is.
In the grander scheme of things. I think that I had a almost pathological fear of HIV, which now I've learned a lot more and I'm not as afraid of. But certainly that was a big deal in the early '90s when I slammed my closet door shut. Um, but but no, I've not really, and at this point, I really don't have any concerns that I don't understand. I mean, I've researched what I feel like I need to research, and I feel comfortable with knowing what I need to know. So,
Right. Okay. How about professionally?
well, I never worried about my sexuality in terms of my profession.
Okay.
When I came out, I was working for a government contractor, so I knew that I would be protected regardless. Um, I remember as I came out, I was really terrified because some of the people that I was working with at the time, I counted as friends. I felt close to because they had really seen me through some really tough times, although they didn't necessarily know that. And I was really afraid of rejection, and none of them, even the most religious of them, were just you know uh, perfect. You couldn't have had a more smooth and embracing coming out than I had with them. But I think that I was lucky in that I was never in a situation where I had to worry about my boss, um, firing me. I mean, there are people in my state that could get fired for their sexuality, and I'm lucky in the sense that I work for a federal contractor, or I am a federal contractor, therefore I'm protected. That's something that's protected for me. So
That's
I'm
good.
very, very grateful there.
How about spiritually? Any effect?
Yeah, I would say that growing up in Oklahoma, that whole the buckle of the Bible Belt kind of a thing. Uh, I was I was not really raised very religious to begin with. We were the family that went on Christmas and Easter, and that was about it. Um, but there was enough of that right wing rhetoric early on, even in the '90s, about I remember going to a revival once because this girl wanted me to go to this revival with her, and the preacher spent a half hour just talking about how gay people are going to go to hell, and this was after my dad came out, so that was certainly very uncomfortable.
Sure.
And so I rejected traditional religions pretty early on anyway. I think at this point, I've kind of, as I went through Al-Anon and as I kind of grew in a lot of different ways, I sort of found my spiritual path, which is kind of a new agey, I guess. I mean, I don't follow any prescribed anything. I don't believe that you have to go to a building and do a certain mysterious process in order to be heard, because your higher power is really inside you, and however you speak to it is how you speak to it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that I came to all of that because I didn't feel like that any organized religions really spoke to that. I will say that I have a tendency to have a somewhat visceral reaction to any preacher. So I've even gone to some really liberal gay churches, and just the patter of the preacher's voice tends to turn me off. So, I miss the message of whatever they're trying to say because of that, because of the atmosphere. But so the simple answer to your question is, yeah, I think that I have found a spiritual place, and I think part of that has been through the exploration of who I am and forgiving what I've done to myself and to others, and recognizing that I am perfect the way that I am, that I have to conform.
Okay. And now you kind of talked about your family, and how this has affected your wife and your kids, but just in general, other effects on your family, any families?
No, I never had a chance to come out to. Well, I tried to come out to my dad once when I was 16, but he didn't really want to hear anything about that. I think that he was just embarrassed. My dad was very good at uh, putting things in boxes. So he had his family people, and he had his gay people, and he had his work people, and another. He did not want to have bleed over. Um, and So that, and I have a tendency to talk around things. So maybe I didn't really try to come out to him. Maybe that was just in my head. And I never came out to my mom. Um, my kids have been, they were incredibly cool from the minute that I came out to them. Their first words were, "Okay, Dad, that's great. Can we go get a pizza?" You know? And as far as extended family, I mean, unfortunately, I don't. Like I said, we were very insulated, so we really didn't have a lot of connection with our larger family. I mean, I have a couple of sisters. I've had no pushback from anybody. Only acceptance. Everybody that I've ever come out to has been accepting and loving, and so I feel really grateful for that. But no, I don't have a very close family. But I think that that's just the nature of my particular family.
That's good. Any other areas of your life, or anything else you wanted to talk about?
I think that the main area of my life that has been affected by my sexuality is really me as an individual and how I connect to the world. So it's both small and huge at the same time. So and after I kind of came out to myself and accepted who I am, everything else seemed, all the things that were difficult in life seemed to just fall in place. Those different little stresses, those little things that I'm sure have no real connection. But it was like it was easier to get my bills paid. It was easier to get, the rest of life was not as big a struggle. And I'm sure really that's not a change, but it was a difference in the way that I was feeling. And I think a lot of that has to do with once you are not swimming against the tide, regular challenges become regular and not overwhelming. That's one of the things. I've just started a Gamma chapter, or in the process of starting a Gamma chapter here in Oklahoma City. Which, right now I've only got one person signed up, but, who knows? We'll see how it goes. But I want to be able to bring that peace to other people. And I know that I got a lot of that through Gamma or through How. I mean, it's really, How is just an online version of it, which it's a little bit different than Gamma, I guess. But, I really feel strongly that I know that there's a lot of guys that are like me, especially in my city, that there's a lot of guys that are struggling like I was 5 and 6 years ago. And, the thought that I could bring them a community that will accept them and where they won't feel so rejected on different levels. I mean, one of the challenges that we have is sometimes I meet gay guys and who came out when they were young and they don't understand the struggles of a guy like me. They don't understand, why did you get married in the first place? Why did you, quote, lie to her? And you had these kids, and why did you do that? And why are you so selfish, or whatever terminologies they use? And it really boils down to that they don't understand that life cycle. I mean, they don't understand what it means to have a kid. I had a guy that I dated for a while, and he just was incensed when I said, "Hey, I need to take this call for my kid." And he felt put off, like I was talking to another boyfriend or something, because it just is something that's outside of his realm of understanding. So again, it affects everything in big ways and little ways.
Yeah. Okay. Now, you'd mentioned, so I just want to give you a chance. You talked about being on TV at one point.
So yeah, so Amy and I have, because we're both in the email group, the mixed orientation group. I don't remember what the letters are now.
MMOMW, the Making Mixed Oriented Marriages Work. Okay.
That's it.
Okay.
And there's been, because I think there's a lot of things that are still undefined. I mean, everything I've said to you is stuff that I've said to Amy, but she doesn't want to get divorced, and like I said, you can't live with somebody for 20 years and not have a sense of affection for them.
Mm-hmm.
She's all right if I'm not living with her. So, in any case, she found this British television show that was producing a documentary, and this is when I was still living in D.C. And when I'd taken that job, I was under the impression that there was going to be opportunities for me to come back to Oklahoma on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm.
Turned out not to be the case. And it was expensive to come back and forth, and so here we found this company that was willing to pay for me to come home for the weekend, and just happened to put me on TV at the same time. So we talked to them, and we vetted the show. We watched some of their other documentaries before we did this, but so this British company, it was for sort of a channel that was sort of like, it was obviously designed or geared towards women. The show was, and our show was following two couples. One was Amy and I, and the other was a young couple that still had very young children. And in both cases, the men were gay, and so in Amy and I's relationship, it was talking about or highlighting the fact that, well, we here's the reality, and we're dealing with that, and we care for each other, and that kind of thing. And the other family was, like I said, they're younger, and he had been notoriously gay, he said, on campus, and got married, and he had a couple of kids, and and he was sort of suppressing his sexuality physically, but not mentally, if that makes sense. So they just followed us around. So, like I said, it was kind of a heady experience to have this camera crew following us around. Took us to all the places in Oklahoma that we wouldn't have eaten at ever because they're really expensive. Because we encouraged them to take us to the nicest restaurants. And they, so they photographed us, with the camera, and they had to go in and get permission from the manager to make sure that everybody was okay. And anyway, so that part was kind of fun. But and then the resulting documentary, I keep on waiting for it to be online so that I can share it with everybody. But it hasn't been yet. Apparently, it's been broadcast in Britain about 3 or so times, because I have one friend in Britain who has commented every time he sees it on. Mm-hmm. But and I don't know what sort of reaction it had within Britain. I don't know if it was one of those things that people liked or didn't like, or if it was just indifferent. It's like I said, something that you just kind of have it on the women's entertainment channel or something. I mean, it was very much geared towards women, target audience. But it was fun.
Not bad. Okay. Yeah, if you ever find out, like, if that gets online, let me know. I'd love to see it.
I'll share it with you as soon as I'm sure that at some point it will, mm-hmm. But as soon as it is, I will share it with the group for sure.
Okay. Anything else you want to share, or I just want to make sure you had that chance. So.
Yeah, no, I think that you've asked some good questions, and I can't think of anything else that is burning in my head that needs to come out.
Okay, very cool. Well, thank you again for taking the time to do this. I really appreciate it. Yeah. And I will see you online too.
All right. Talk to you later.
Hey, this is Mike. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to see some more videos, we'll be getting them out onto our YouTube channel, and you can also check them out on the Facebook page and our website, intersections.info. If you'd like to be interviewed, there's a link below that'll show you how to go through the process and get in touch with us so we can interview you. If you'd like to help support us financially, we do have a Patreon campaign set up. If you contribute monthly at the bronze level or higher, we'll give you early access to all the videos about 24 hours before everybody else gets to see them, plus some private chats and things like that are available. So check that out. And if you'd like to just make a one-time contribution, we do have a GoFundMe campaign that's out there to try to get some better equipment, things like that. So check us out and let us know what you think in the comments, and appreciate it. Thanks.